Is there anything like specifically that you point to though?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said nature versus nurture, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it actually, whether it's by nature or by nurture, but I was definitely predisposed, or that would be nature, right? But I'm a dreamer, right? I think you can, probably confirm that I've been known to spend a lot of time, in my head, right? And so I think, that capacity to dream, if you will, is one of my greatest strengths. But when it's not harnessed, it's also can be disastrous. And as a kid, my self-confidence was never developed. So I was very insecure. And those two things of like being in your head all the time and being insecure, made it such that and I think this is genuine, right? I spent a significant amount of my childhood, very uncomfortable in my own skin, right? I think basketball is like a great highlight of this, where these two things came together. I mean, basketball was like my first love. When growing up, I played from as young as I could practically walk. And then once, we started getting into competitive basketball, that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to play, right? And even though we're talking about a young age here, like second to sixth grade, right? I was the best player in our team or in our town, I should say. And, I was a little bit older for my grade, but I always played a year up too. And I was the best player in the town. And it was just not something that I thought about at all, right? I just loved to play. I knew I was the best, and I just went out and hooped, right? And this all changed in sixth grade. I remember sixth grade travel trial. So sixth grade was the first year that you could go out for a travel basketball team. And I had actually, when I was in fifth grade, I went out for the sixth grade travel team because I just been playing up forever, right? And then some mother narked on me because she wanted her son to be able to do it. And anyway, like I'd gone to the tryouts there. I'd killed it. I was, and again, I recognize, right, we're talking still about young age, but the point is that, I had all the skill and I just never thought about playing. And it was sixth grade travel tryout where I first remember thinking instead of playing, right? We were at the tryout and there was this drill that they ran where they set up 7 shots around the paint, with the first shot being, just from the block and the last shot being from the other block, right? And so the block, that's a layup, right? Yeah. And I remember thinking, what if I missed this layup? And of course I missed the layup, right? And then I made the B team and was, completely devastated. And, with few exceptions from that point forward, my basketball career was just a complete nightmare, right? Like I was, I overthought everything. I was afraid to have the ball in my hand, right? And it was super uncomfortable. Like I would lose, one of the things that would happen is I would lose my facilities. Like I would lose my access to like certain cognitive abilities, right? It was like I was in a spotlight. But the interesting thing, right, is, and this has a point, but the interesting thing is that, St. Paul's, right? So our St. Paul's Catholic school team, I was a fucking beast on that team, right? And yes, it was Catholic school. The competition, wasn't as strong, but that wasn't, that didn't make up for the difference in my performance and my experience of the game. It was that, in travel, there were a lot of other really good players, right? my skill level was tops, but there were other, good players. In St. Paul's, it was like I was just head and shoulders the best dude. So I'd go in, I'd be on the court there. I just knew I was the guy, right? Mm-hmm. And so I could play. And I, at the time, I had no idea like how to take the self-belief that I had in a St. Paul's uniform and, bring it into, when I put the travel uniform on, or certainly to, cultivate that self-belief that I felt there in, any kind of intentional way in any other area of my life. Right. So, this extended to the same sort of complex extended to, so much of my social life. And just like, St. Paul's versus travel, like it's not like I didn't have friends, like, I had friends, right? But, I had friends that I was comfortable with, like kind of being myself, but, in any environment where I perceived myself as less than, right? Like there was somebody that was, more confident than me, that was funnier than me, whatever, right? Like I would just shrink. And I would have like, experiences, all group experiences, right? Because if you're in a group, right, there's going to be somebody, right? And just like, having, just like when I had the ball in my hands on the floor, if the attention was on me, it was like I would just lose, my ability to exist naturally, right? Mm-hmm. And it was incredibly uncomfortable. And so, I say that because what I'm describing to you, right, this is the type of person that alcohol is going to work for, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't start drinking until, really until college because, mom was a Nazi, right? And it just wasn't even worth it. Yeah. But credit to her. Of course I did eventually discover that, a couple of drinks and that voice, if you want to call it whatever that is, inside me that had always been holding me back would disappear. So it's not that, anything became an immediate problem, not at all, right? Mm-hmm. But, a seed was definitely, planted there, that it was a solution of sorts for me, right? For working through, discomfort, insecurity, right? So that's definitely one. I'll call that maybe the predisposition part, right? I think another really big factor was just my perception. When we open this interview or whatever podcast, whatever this conversation, I talked about just being, curious about how people get certain awarenesses, right? But, my perception, I had a perception that was formed over a lifetime of experiences, right? To give you some examples of things that form this, if you, think about when we were kids, and I'm not talking about our dad, right? Because, our dad, he likes his wine, but there's nothing, it's not like he's drinking all the time at all. But the adult males, in general, like, what was the first thing if they were working around the house, yard work, or they just got back from a long day's work, what was the first thing they did when they got home, right? You see it, I can hear it now, right? The crack of the beer, the that feeling of relief, and whether it's the movies. I noticed this recently, right? It's like I was watching something and I said, man, it's almost like every single strong male protagonist in almost every movie that you see after a stressful experience, what are they going to do? They're going to pour a drink, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like this isn't like an excuse or anything like that, but my perception was like at a very early age through this subliminal messaging and just how, what would be the word? Just how integrated, alcohol is into our culture. It was synonymous with me, and I viewed it as a totally normal behavior for, relieving stress, right? Like it was normal to do that, right? And then the the other thing was that the people that I looked up to the most, it seemed to me that they over-indexed on partying and on drinking, and given my entrepreneurial like sort of bent, right? Like I think I was looking and paying closer attention to people that were making a lot of money and that were either running their own company or seemed to be reporting to no one, right? And for all these people, like the lines between work and drinking seemed to be pretty blurred. Now that may not have actually been the case, but that's certainly how I perceived it to be, right?
Yeah. In the times when you were with them, which often would have been vacations and and just the fact that like you're getting to see family. Yeah. Oftentimes it's a break from the norm for everybody.
Yeah, and it wasn't even, I'm not just talking about family. Like we have some incredibly charismatic family members that like you just like are magnetic, right? So you're paying attention to what they're doing and like have fun. But, I'm talking about, I spent 5 years in finance, right? And just seeing how people in that world who make a lot of money are rolling at lunchtime. Like, as I moved up and started like, getting traction in my own business, it seemed to me like where all the deals were happening, they were all happening, over drinks. And it was just like part of being successful, it seemed like to me, right? And all that may be a bunch of bullshit, but here's the reality was that my perception, which is crazy to think when how off the rails I got at a certain point was that, when it wasn't dark, like before it got dark, right? My perception was that, I was just doing what anybody else would do in my shoes, right? Like I had created, this autonomy for my life and this independence of, structure, like by being an entrepreneur, that if I was having a couple of beers, at lunch while doing a little work, that's not problematic. That's just the lifestyle. And the only reason that you're not here sitting next to me doing it is because you're a schmuck and you have a 9 to 5, right? Like that was my perspective. Yeah. And then even when it got dark, dude, like really dark, like I'm telling you, I know we're going to dig more into this, but even when you came out into California and after that, I did not perceive myself to have a problem. I thought that I was dealing with a level, and in a lot of instances, this is true, right? It's not just that I just was just an addict, right? Like that's not it. There's so much underneath that, right? But I thought I was just dealing with this level of stress and anxiety that no one else could possibly comprehend, right? And if you understood what I was going through, you would not be bothering me about this stupid thing, right? So that perception is really wild. And when you it's something in the recovery community that they talk a lot about is like this concept of choice, right? Is it a choice? Is it not a choice, right? And in my experience, I have I definitely have an appreciation for kind of how complicated that is. And, on one hand, you can't deny that there's choice involved, but on the other hand, like it's more complicated than that. But probably the best way that I ever heard this described was in The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, where he says, without awareness, there is no choice, right? And believe it or not, for a long time, that was the way it was. I didn't think I had a problem. It's crazy. So perception we talked about. And then, like the truth of the matter is, right, of course, there's my entrepreneurial journey. And there's no separating my experience of addiction from that. There really isn't. If there's anything that I was ever predisposed to, it was probably to be an entrepreneur, right? I've always, with like my entire being, rejected the idea of being told what to do or being, on somebody else's time. If I was on somebody else's time for anything, hard pass for me, right? Like I hated school, hated the concept of 9 to 5s. They felt like prisons to me, right? So as a part of that, I rejected establishments and systems, right? Which again, just kind of like my capacity for dreaming, being an asset and a liability. So was that, right? Like in a lot of ways that has worked out really well for me. And there's so much about that I wouldn't change. But on, the other hand, I think what came along with that was a total rejection of any kind of structure, which was really not beneficial to me. Right. When I was the whole time, the 10, 15 years, whatever it was, I would keep crazy hours, right? Like I'd be working, all hours of the night, pulling all-nighters. I had no daily practices or routines that maintained my well-being, right? And now, today, while I'm still a wild card for sure, right? Like, or at least I'm just not, I'm a free spirit, whatever you want to say. My entire life is underpinned by structure. And if I'm in a funk today, that's because I've gotten out of the disciplines, and my answer is to always fall back on that structure of my daily routine. And then, do you mind if I say one other thing?
Sure. Or we have no limits here.
Yeah. So connecting to the entrepreneurship experience as well, which obviously the structure piece was, a big part of, in terms of why that was detrimental, not having a structure. But the other thing, I had no connection. I had no purpose bigger than myself. I had no connection to any kind of higher power, right? In terms of having a purpose, like there was purity in, there is definitely purity in my entrepreneurship, or my journey of entrepreneurship, and just how that inspiration came about. And, at the beginning, it being all naivete, and there was purity in that. But, the underlying why was to get rich. Mm-hmm. To get rich, and to get power from being rich that would just cover up for all my insecurities, right? And then that's a gas that's only gonna take you so far, right? And then in terms of like, any kind of power greater than myself, like we spent how many years in the Catholic Church between St. Paul's, BC High. That pushed me away so hard from any concept of God. So all I'd say about that is that, when there is no power greater than yourself, then it's all on you. And no pun intended, but that's one fucking hell of a cross to bear when you set off on a journey like I did, to, and maybe I give a little bit of context as to, exactly what I did on the entrepreneurship front as well. Obviously, this, but when I was still in college, right, I was working on a fixed income trading desk in Boston, starting like my sophomore year in finance, right? And in addition to being able to meet, a bunch of amazing people that are still my, friends, I got the opportunity to get a glimpse into what my life would look like if I didn't create, an exit strategy for myself post-college, right? So right around my sophomore, junior year, I got super, just super motivated. It was like I look back on that and it's just like, wow, man, that was... I was being called forward. I really know that to be the case. It was just like this. I didn't sleep. It was clear that I was. I've never quite had an experience like that. Still to date, I don't think. But in any case, I lifelong sports fan, right? Had played fantasy sports from the time I could walk to in dad's leagues and NCAA brackets all growing up, and got into sports betting as a form of entertainment when I was in college, betting through a bookie just that went to school with us or whatever. And, at this time, this was 10 years before sports betting was legal in the United States. So it was just all black market.
2010 you graduated?
I graduated in 2011, spring of 2011. So this has started around, because I did a study abroad in Madrid where I was like studying the European markets as a like special project, the European gambling markets, and that was at the end of 2009. Mm-hmm. And then the federal ban on sports betting got lifted in 2018. So this is 10 years before, sports betting became legal here. And, I started looking at, as I mentioned, what was going on over in Europe, and especially in the UK, where I saw, a fully legal, regulated online sports betting market. And I kind of formed a thesis that created the basis of my career, right? Or formed the basis for my career, which was that I believe that one day what I'm seeing over here is going to come here, right? And I knew how much money was at play just in the illegal market in the United States, just frigging massive, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of envisioned that there would be this gold rush that would happen. And anyone, when that inevitable moment came where the market opened up and everybody wanted to get in, right? That anybody that prepared for that moment would be rich beyond their wildest dreams. And so I just started building, right? I raised my first investor check of $10,000 before I graduated from CJ Shrunko, who I had interned for on that trading desk, and who was the first person that believed in my vision and in me, really. I remember he would take the boat home, would work on the desk, and then would take the boat home. He'd buy me beers on the boat, and we're walking home to the boat, to take it to Hingham from the office one day, and he just wrote a $10,000 check, no paperwork, nothing, right? It was just like, I believe in you. And in any case, I'm not going to try to get into talking about how hard entrepreneurship is. I mean, it's one of those things where if you haven't done it, there's nothing that I'm going to be able to say to you that's going to enable for you to comprehend it. But what I will say is that, I faced all of the, all of the challenges that any first-time tech entrepreneur was going to face. But I also spent the first 10 years of that journey, or 9-10 years, right, building a company for an industry that didn't even exist yet, right? So I'm this like insecure kid with no control over his mind, right? No tools at his disposal to work through things like stress and anxiety and fear, and no structure, no purpose other than getting rich. And, I choose this path, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just, I can look back on that now and clearly say, like, that's a fucking, disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, you took all those things and then you said, I'm going to climb the hardest, biggest mountain.
yeah, right.
And that is guaranteed to have landslides and tornadoes and
dude,
and avalanches.
100%. Yeah.
And I have no tool belt or
shield. Dude, you should have seen. I mean, dude, if there's one thing that our parents, I think, other than having a good heart, put into us as kids, was that you can do anything you want to do. Like, mm-hmm. That's the one thing I remember always, that, and now knowing how much of a sponge we are as kids and how much, like, that matters, like, that was massive for me. You should have heard me talk back then. It was just like, like, I remember once, I was still a junior and I was talking to Uncle Joe and I was just telling him, very matter of fact, it was like, no, I'm going to do this. It's going to be step 1, step 2, step 3, I'm rich. Yeah. Right? like it's crazy. Yeah. But yes, you summed it up great. So just to like,
I will piggyback on the parents part, because I agree. Like, and the other thing I think they never did was they never, like, I guess for good, like, for better or for worse, it was like they never course corrected us. It was like, if we decided to do something, it was like, okay, go for it,
right.
Let us know if we can help. Probably them knowing we were going to fall flat on our fucking face, but they let us do that. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like, there was no discouragement around trying anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it was huge. I mean, that was really like, and then, to take it a step further, obviously, like, all the hard work that they've done has provided the ability for us to even try, mm-hmm. right? Like,
100%.
Despite everything that's happened over, like, I never, at mid-30s, do you want to be living, in your parents' house? No, mm-hmm. right? But you always had that if you needed it, right? Yeah. There was always, so their hard work made it possible for us. Not only did they not dissuade us and put into us that, you can be anything you want to be, but their hard work enabled us to even make the effort, right? Mm-hmm. But just to tie, kind of round out, like, how I got to where it was, where you flew out to California, right? So, I just kind of described how I got started in entrepreneurship, and then, by 2018, 10 years in at this point, right? I had just been so beaten down by the process. I had lost, any of that purity of what it was that I was doing, and, like, certainly any kind of love that I had for what it was that I was doing. And I really, I looking back on it now, I know what it was, right? I lived in a constant state of fear. I was living in, like, this constant state of fear.
And that, can I ask one more on that? Because still something I struggle with, following a similar path to you over the years.
Yeah.
Was that driven a lot by investors and, getting those calls that you don't want to get, and the emails you don't want to get, that, whether it's somebody asking for updates or, can I get my money out? Or like, was a lot of it that when it came to fear? Like, was it a lot of the business things?
All of the business things.
Yeah.
All of the business things. And that's the part where I'm not going to really try to go down that path of explaining how hard that shit is. Like, I think most people, and not to say most people, right? But like, I think a lot of people are generally uncomfortable when their rent is late, right? Like, when you think about what it is that, in terms of the financial uncertainty and all the financial pressures from all the different stakeholders, including your own and, your girlfriend. And I mean, it can be, if you don't have control over your mind, if you don't have practices to keep you grounded, if you don't have a connection to a higher power, and you're not telling yourself that everything is happening for a reason, you're going to have a psych break. I mean, it's really, it's like that simple. And so anyway, I had, at this point in, at this time, I had, by this point I had developed the habit of, going to booze to calm my nerves, right? And unbeknownst to me, right, that's only feeding the cycle of fear and anxiety and stress. And not to mention, the thing that, like, I've really, in the last 3 years, which is an absolute blessing, I've kind of had a do-over, right? I've had this opportunity to really square up with all of the things that broke me the first time through. And, the thing that I've learned is, first of all, fear has this way of, if you start running from it, the more that you run from it, the bigger that it gets, right? But it really is something that's, what do they say? A mile wide and an inch deep, right? When you face it, it has a way of dissipating. But I was, I did not have a healthy relationship with fear and discomfort. And so I definitely, by this time, 2018, had at least, and I'm sure you would have a different perspective. Maybe you think I was further along. But at least I had I know consistently for a while I had been going to have a drink to calm my nerves in pretty much everything, right? So May 14th, 2018, my company, that was the day that the Supreme Court lifted the federal ban on sports betting, right? So this thing I had predicted 10 years earlier happens. And on the very same day, my company, Daily Number, signs an agreement for Richard Sherman to join the company as a co-founder. And as it turned out, Richard,
who was still a very big popular athlete in 2018. No longer now, but very relevant, and relevant in, both in terms of like who he was as an athlete, but also how he was perceived as a businessman, right? Having gone to Stanford, right? So if you're going to sign an athlete to become a co-founder of your company, like Richard Sherman was the guy, at least in the NFL. And so he joins as a co-founder on that same day. And then 3 months later, we announced the partnership. And it's turned out that Richard was the first ever active NFL player to take a founding stake in a fantasy sports or a betting company, right? So it kind of had this, for the media, it had this salaciousness to it. There was potential controversy there that they could create, right? So it was picked up like wildfire, right? So like the partnership ended up being announced. We gave the exclusive to ESPN.com or to ESPN, and the partnership was actually announced on the front page of
ESPN, and then it was picked up by every, media outlet that you can think of. And for, a 48-hour period, I mean, we were everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember getting text messages and from all kinds of people. I mean, the ESPN posted at 12, and I started getting text messages at like 12:02 from people that I hadn't even told it was happening, right? They just saw it and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
holy shit,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you see, you read these posts from friends and family that's like, on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, where it's like, this is what 10 years of hard work looks like, right? This is like,
Yeah, sure.
And so from an outside perspective, it may have looked like, he finally made it, right? Mm-hmm. But I'll never forget, man. I was sitting. News broke at 12. I was sitting in my shower, I beer in my hand, like was not my first of the day, and I just felt sad and empty and like. I didn't know why. And that was like the beginning of the end. The next 12 months were fucking insane, like insane. The Sherman partnership led to a partnership with Floyd Mayweather. That led to a partnership with Antonio Brown, who at that time, Antonio Brown, he was the best wide receiver in the league. Right? Mm-hmm. This is before he went off the deep end. And he was the most talked about athlete in maybe all of sports at the time. He was moving from Pittsburgh to the Raiders. And so anyway, and I'm flying all around the country, right, doing content shoots with these guys. What happened was, like, I'd been at it for 10 years, and I just had so many perspectives that were kind of, I know, to be unhealthy. And so one of the perspectives that I had here was, I thought it was the time, like I thought it was now or never for us. Like, it had been 10 years. I'd been limping along. It was like, this is our time. Like, the federal ban's been lifted. We got all these athletes around us. Like, I know the M&A market in this space is about to pop off. We got to fucking go. Right. So I just like slammed the pedal to the metal. And the infrastructure that was underneath all this stuff, it just wasn't, it had been so many years of like turned over engineers and like different teams in and out, that like all the infrastructure needed to be rebuilt. Right. And at the same time, I'm, paying a lot of these athletes. We're doing all these content shoots. So I raised at least $1 million in 2019, but we were spending it, faster than I could raise it. And, as the financial pressure, it was like every day I would wake up and I'd have, less than 2 weeks to come up with my next, 50 grand, and then 50 grand turns into 100 grand. Right. Mm-hmm. And, as the financial pressures got, just escalated, so did my drinking. Right. And then I remember that, I was in a hole, like I had a 100K nut I was staring down the barrel of a gun at, and I, went up, anyway, I was able to pull yet another like rabbit out of my hat, trick shot, right? Pulled in 150 grand. And like 2 weeks later, it was gone. I was looking at the next, I was looking at the next 100K,
it's an endless,
right?
Endless
and I just broke. It was like I just completely crumbled under the pressure. I think the best analogy that I could give, a picture I could paint, was it's like Cool Runnings, man. Right. Like we had all the athletes. It was like that fresh coat of paint, that sexy black, yellow, and green Jamaican paint. Right. And I just whipping around the corners to the finish line. But at the end of the day, I was just in a rickety old bobsled. It wasn't strong enough my foundation wasn't strong enough to hold up against that pressure.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're back. We're back after some camera changes. I wanna get to the next call, as I said, from Mom.
It should be light.
We're keeping it super light here. So I don't know how many. Well, actually, I could tell you because I remember this is when Kobe died.
Yeah.
So I don't know the date.
Yeah, it was
whatever that
was.
was.
It was right after Martin Luther King weekend, but I was in the hospital when Kobe died. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was whatever that is. February maybe. Is that?
No, it was January. It was Martin Luther King weekend.
It was
after.
Was it
mid-January?
2020 or 2021? Was it another year?
2020.
Okay, so it was all okay. So
yeah. So
I don't have
there's
that
a 20. Yeah, because 2019. So that's the Christmas I missed, and then I can't remember if you came out at the end of December or the beginning of January.
Yeah.
Then we flew home. We went down to CL in Florida, and then we flew home.
Right. So I guess it was only a couple weeks later then. Mom's next call. Tough one.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Couldn't. It's one of the we've made fun of her over the years for certain times when this is not called for, where she just she can't form a sentence. This one was, I think, worthy of that. Essentially told you tried to kill yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I again have gotten like loose details here and there, but like I'd love to hear it from your end, like what happened, and like how do you think about that, and why just what happened.
So I in the deep end when you came out, I had shut it down for at least a month and a half, right? 2 months, probably a month and a half.
You shut it down, meaning you given up.
I given up on my, like, and not the funny thing, like I just given up. I didn't want to be here anymore, man. Mm-hmm. I remember distinctly, like, I was just drinking 24/7 at this point, right? Like, I would, I remember for, during that period of time out in Los Gatos, where I remember 3 a.m. in the morning was like this only time where I felt any comfort, any peace, because there was like a one tiny window of time where nobody, no matter what coast you were on, nobody was coming for me with a message, right, of any kind. And so I could, I was like sheltered at that hour. But, I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, bottle of wine right there, and just 24/7, like nuts, right? Mm-hmm. Crazy. So, and then, during that time, like I was definitely, I definitely thought about ending my life, right? It's not something, well, I guess I did. I thought about how I would do it, right? In any case, so we fly back, and I end up checking into a detox facility, which is just like, okay, you're drying out for 5 days, right? It's not recovery or anything like that. You're getting off the street. And so I go into the detox, and then, I think it was there 4 or 5 days, something like that. And then I went down to Chatham Bars Inn, actually, and stayed Martin Luther King weekend down there with Mom and Dad. And the deal was that they were then going to drive me on Tuesday or Wednesday to like a sober house, I think it was. Something like a halfway house, not a halfway, because it was like there was a program associated with it that Mom's cousin Neil operated.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So I actually, went up there, got checked in, and I'm there, and like I had said to you, in terms of the company, it was the freight train was running, right, and so when I had a hard stop, it had a hard stop, and it wasn't pretty, and so I was thinking that I was because I was so like my mind was so messed up. I couldn't think straight because of how much I was drinking, right? But at this point, being 5 days out of detox, and then 3 days on Cape Cod with Mom and Dad, like I'm kind of starting to think that I'm coming to and seeing things clearly. The whole time I'm still trying to solve, right? Like I got this kind of this almost felt like a shield being in the detox, right? Where I had some safety, and then when I was on the Cape, I felt safe, and so I'm sitting there, I'm just trying to like move what am I going to do? How am I going to fix this, right? And so, I think that I'm starting to actually see what it is that I've done, and I start to lose my shit, the first night I was at this house, I stayed up all night. I was like a crazy person. And the next day we go, and there's supposed to be there's like a daily structure. We go to something, and they do whatever, the structured day at this place. And so we get on site there, and, I'm just completely, I'm so manic. I'm so scared, right? Like my mind is creating all of this, what I've done and what this means. We're just talking about money that is owed to people, basically, right? And it was a lot in some instances. There were people that I cared deeply about that, I had six-figure payables to, but I was losing it, and dude, when you are by far the craziest person at one of those places, like and,
were you aware of that?
Dude, I was disruptive, right? I was just pacing around the entire place. I was a maniac. But I remember every second of it. But what happened was really why I had a psychosis, a psych break, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, honestly, I don't know if it was related to the alcohol. Like the people have alcohol-induced psychosis, but at this point I was, dry for, close to a week or more. But I definitely had a psych break. Right. And, I remember distinctly, I'm in this parking lot, and it was crazy what my mind did. It went from like, I'm, oh my God, it's really bad, to, you're responsible for all that, to you're going to jail, to you're going to jail for the rest of your life. That then became an absolute reality in my mind. And so I'm I've all of a sudden now I'm walking around the park, walked off the premise, right? I don't know what town this was in, but there were a bunch of like restaurants and stuff around, and I'm walking, just pacing around, and in my mind I'm saying, how did I get here, right? Like I had this, great family, I went to really good schools, and now here I am. I'm about to be locked up for the rest of my life. And then it turned to, they're coming to get me right now. And they probably were looking for me, but, not the fucking FBI. the people at the place where I wandered off. But I to give you some sense about like how real it was to me that now they were coming to get me, to haul me away, was I had my iPhone on me, and it was actually the bottom of the screen or the top of the wherever the slide to turn off is, I think it's the bottom, right? So that part of my screen was broken. So as I'm walking around, I'm like, oh, they're probably tracking my phone, I should shut it off, right? Mm-hmm. And I go to shut off my phone, and because that bottom part of my screen wasn't showing, the interface looked like I was being blocked from being able to turn off my phone. So I'm like, oh, they're definitely tracking me. And I ditched my phone into a snowbank, right? And so now this narrative is building in my mind. And again, it's an insane experience, but it's also, wild to see how much your mind can create your reality, right? And so as I looked at it, I only had a limited amount of time and a choice to make, that either I was going to jail for the rest of my life or I was going to kill myself. And I started walking into restaurants, and I was looking for a steak knife at a place, and I ended up at a BJ's, and I walk into the BJ's, and I'm thinking my time is running out, and I'm walking up and down the aisles looking for a pair of scissors, and I go and I find a pair of scissors. I look at the price, and I don't have enough money in my bank account to cover the scissors, and so I ended up walking up to the little things with like the pens and scissors sometimes that the cashiers have. Mm-hmm. And I grabbed a pair of scissors, and first I went into the bathroom, and I remember I was sitting in the bathroom, and I just thought about this. I rarely think about this, which is, I try to connect to this experience because I know how blessed I am to be here. But it's hard to connect to the emotion of it sometimes. But I was thinking about this the other day, how just wild it was. I was sitting in a BJ's bathroom, and I'm like, holding this thing, getting ready to do it. Didn't do it, walked out of the bathroom, and walked out the door, and there was kind of like a gully down off the parking lot. Walked down, sat underneath the tree, and took the blade, the scissors, and it wasn't a play around thing. Like, it was like I cut it so deep that I could see my bone. The one crazy aspect of it was that I didn't feel any pain whatsoever, no pain, and I was not somebody with a significant pain tolerance, but I was just I was sitting there, and my blood was in a pool of my own blood, and waiting to die, and it was taking some time, it was taking time, and I was like, I'm not going to be the guy. This is where my head, I'm not going to be the guy that doesn't do it, that fails at doing this. And so I cut it again. And And I know now, right, that every experience of life is spiritual. And somehow somehow a thought got in there that if I could still live, which I didn't know, that mom wasn't going to find me there. And so I picked myself back up, and I walked across the parking lot to the front of the BJ's, and I asked for help. And at first thought people are like, "What's going on?" And when I realized you should just, people out, people are good, man. Some dude, somebody called 911, or probably multiple people called 911. Some dude took his belt off. It was like, everybody was trying to help. Anyway, the ambulance came, and even in the ambulance, like, I thought that, I thought I was dying. The guy, the ambulance kid in the ambulance said something like, tomorrow's going to be a better day. And I said to him, I laughed and I said to him, yeah, you say that. That's a great line, or something like that. I'm sure you say that to everybody. Like, be straight with me, right? And this is my last seconds. Be straight with me. And of course, I wasn't dying, but I thought I was. And then I got into the hospital, and I remember they had to move me, and I was like in like a bag, and they moved me in the bag from one table to the next. And then I thought, yeah, I'm dying. So I started saying, all the things you would say, right? Tell people this, tell people that. And I even, Neil, mom's cousin Neil, who was incredible, he was there while I was still conscious, and he had picked up the phone and called, or given the phone to me. It was, I don't remember if I talked to mom, but I know I talked to dad. And I said to dad, like, I told dad that was the last time I could talk to him. Crazy. So it's probably something I should talk to mom and dad about.
Oh, full circle.
Yeah. So yeah, that was. But that's to take it back to positive. Like, I really know that the whole experience is beautiful. Like, I have experienced, suffering at a very deep level, but it's for a reason. And of course I don't want to, I'm sharing my experience, but I also understand that there was a lot of people around that were affected too, right? But yeah, I mean, if I knew how to cut my wrist in the way to bleed out, I would not be here. Mm-hmm. If I had access to, some other thing like a firearm, I would not be here. But I'm supposed to be here. And that's that's not for me, right? I'm not supposed to be here for me. It's for other people, right? So yeah. And I guess just to finish on this part, hopefully, the craziest thing, maybe the craziest thing, was that wasn't rock bottom for me, at least as I experienced it. So after that, went to a psych ward. Of course, like I thought I was just going to check out of the hospital. I told a great story. Man, don't worry about me. I'm thinking I'll be on the street the next day. No, sir. And so I spent I don't know, a week or something in a psych ward, and then flew down to Florida. Our Uncle Joe arranged for me to be at one of his buddies' treatment centers, and I think I spent 30 days there. And to just say a couple things about like the experiences that I've shared. And first of all, it would be disingenuous for me to say there were not aspects of like drinking and partying that I just didn't like, right? That it was like, that would be disingenuous, right? But this wasn't a situation of like me just fucking around all the time. It wasn't that at all. Like I was completely obsessed with my work. 100%. And so I went to the treatment center. I got right back to work. Like I because I was on meds that were like, I was, we were actually doing some, there were some positive things about like being there. And I felt like, again, I was in this place where there was a protection around me, right? So I felt calm, and I was like, I'm sure I was on like ADD meds and stuff like that. So I was like dialed in, and I just got right back to working. Like I was starting to like, okay, how we move from here, where we're at, like, and I left that still not thinking that I had a drinking problem, mm-hmm. right? That I was dealing with such incredible stress and anxiety in that which is true. Again, it's true, but I didn't acknowledge that part, and I got out, and I'm right back at it, and it was a few weeks before I started drinking it, but then COVID hit. And the bottom just fell out because a number of reasons, but like at that point, like I was like, it was over. It seemed like no way like to move forward, and it really felt over when it came over my the company, the thing that I had all my self-value tied up in, and the next year or whatever it was like I really truly feel like I know what hell is. Like it's a place here on earth in your mind, and that's where I was for at least 6 months. So
I do remember you when you were in the hospital and everybody came to the hospital.
yeah.
After the incident you described, you were trying to get your phone and your laptop,
Yeah.
like without like, and you were like asking everyone because everybody there had said no.
Dude, you were like sending messages.
Yeah, you were.
Dude, I had logged on. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But there was like this, I don't know what you call it, but like, let's say as a 1995, like, hospital bed monitor.
Yeah.
And it was such little access to applications. I had like logged on to Facebook and was like messaging people at work that I would never message on Facebook, like friending them on Facebook and sending them messages through the
yeah,
the screen on my hospital bed.
Yeah, that is like the level of obsession now,
Yeah.
That like you were just trying to get like your phone, like you had me checking your email and like respond. I remember I was like responding to L on things. And,
Yeah.
But it just like speaks to, where you were.
Yeah.
But I have two follow-up questions to this because, that I think everybody wants to know. I guess maybe the first one is, for people who have friends or family members that get to similar places or on a similar path to that with substances of any kind or any addiction of any kind.
Yeah.
Like, was there something a friend or a family member could have done? Like, is there anything we could have done?
No.
Yeah.
No, I want to, so I had to have the experience that I had. That's full stop. So everything happened perfectly the way it was supposed to. In terms of what you got, like, you guys were perfect. You did everything that you could have done. Like, I got something different, from each one of you, but it was all a form of love demonstrated in one way or another, right? Like, I think about Dad, and it's like he was always the disciplinarian growing up, right? Like, he's not a big guy, but we were all scared of Dad, right? And I've never talked to them about it, but like I really I really got to understand how much he loves us during that period of time. Like, because what's happening when you're at that stage, so I'm now focused in this answer like toward the end, whereas like, call it 2020, when COVID's going on, and I hate myself, right? Like, you're waking up every day. You wake up and you don't remember going to bed, and you wake up and you're like, you despise yourself, right? And you're kind of, you don't know you're doing it, but you're just reaching out, like, are you judging me? Like, did I do something? Or am I still okay? Right? Do you still love me? And no matter what, like every day, like, because I was living at the house, right? I'd wake up and, I don't say this in like a bad way, right? I say this in an extremely positive way. Dad wouldn't, he acted like nothing was different, and that like he was there with a different type of, it was just, I not really comprehended that in that way before, right? Mom, obviously much different approach, right? But again, that was like ferocious love, right? She was a pain in my ass. And we really there was a lot of, it's always been like that with Mom. Like her approach doesn't, work with me often. And there's like friction around that. And this was no different. But and people will say a lot of different things in terms of like what you should do with somebody, and like there's a don't shame and blame type thing. But to be honest with you, like I needed that shit too, right? Mm-hmm. Like I needed to feel like I was a fuck up. Like shame was part of the formula for me, and it wasn't. That was again coming from a place of love, right? I mean, you and Tara like were unbelievable, right? Yeah. I mean, I texted Tara recently about it. I should probably talk to her about it, but I think the two things that I felt most with Tara was just love and no judgment, right? Like, and she was always there to just, because again, sometimes in that space, it's just like, you need those instances of, you just picked me up, and I'm fucking, got 6 or 7 deep, and you're just talking to me like you don't see that I have no value, right? Like you still love me, right? Mm-hmm. In your case, like what you did was probably how I would like advise. Like if I was thinking about what I would do and what how I plan to move, in terms of helping other people. The first thing you did is like you stood in the light, right? Like, you just, by being the way that you are and the way that you go about your life and seeing like how healthy you are and how sick I was, right? Like that, at some point it's like I start getting curious. I want to, there's things that I want to learn from you, right? And you were always available during, in those times. And, you'd pick a spot and you'd share something with me, or if I'd ask for it, you'd always give it to me. And you sent me which is crazy to think, but you sent me an Instagram clip that very much was a part of starting to reshape the way that I was thinking. I would say it was part of saving my life, because I was, in this point in time, there was multiple times where again I was thinking I'm out of here, right? Like I don't want to be here. But it was like a clip, the Rich Roll clip, where Michael Gervais is interviewing him, and he says, "What would you say to somebody that is really really struggling, right?" And Rich was, looked into the camera and like I never seen the guy before, right? But incredibly articulate, and he said, if you're, what did he say? Anyway, it was something along the lines of like, if you're down and out, I say congratulations, right? If your world is falling apart, I say congratulations. What a fucking opportunity. And there was something about it that was just like, it was like that I needed a shift in perspective, but also I saw this guy, and one of the things that, was in my mind at this time was that I had wasted my entire life. I was 33 years old. I was in that warped thinking of like how our society thinks about retirement and things like that, right? Of like, how am I ever going to make enough money to do anything? And like, I didn't, learn anything of value during this period of time. And I've just wasted my entire life. And I saw Rich, and he was of course in his mid 50s, and the dude was just like, his eyes, man, it was like it was like the color of the ocean. It was just so alive, and just looking at him, it was just like, fuck, man. No, there's a lot of time, and that started to create a shift in my thinking about a longer lens, right? Taking a longer view on things, and then which obviously led to, starting to take different steps and letting, being patient and letting the small things become big things, right? And that was very much, because of how you showed up and like the type of things that you exposed me to by, standing in the light and then being available.
Love it.
Yeah.
So that's a good lead into, I mean, what advice do you have for somebody that is in that same scenario, and how did you go, and maybe you don't know fully,
Yeah.
but like, how did you go from 2020
Yeah.
to now we're sitting here the night before Thanksgiving 2024, and for the past 2 years, you'd say?
3.
3 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Sober?
3
3
years
years?
sober, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know the date?
I think it's November 2nd or November 3rd.
Yeah. So just went over 3 years.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Like, I remember, not to get a little off topic, but I remember when, like, I knew, because there was maybe a few year period where, like, it was always like, you go to a detox and then, like, you'd try to stay sober for a little bit, then there'd be, like, there was a lot of in and out where nobody, like, I knew, like, it was always like a worry, like, you weren't gonna stick with, being sober,
Yeah, that was 2020.
Yeah, 2020, like a lot of,
was a wash cycle.
Yeah. And then I remember, like, probably like, I don't know, at some point in 2021, 2022, like, there was just like it at least felt like there was a switch flipped where, like, you could tell you were just, like, becoming a different person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You were, like, taking steps to become a different person. It wasn't like you were, like, just trying to get sober or just like, do the steps or like whatever, the typical thing is. Like, you were changing how you were living and approaching things. And like, over time, and then it got to a point like a year and a half in where, like, everybody knew, like, you were good. Yeah. And it was like, because you were a different person.
Yeah.
Well, so it's like, how did you get from A to B? I know it's a evolving thing and there's no finish line, like, now you're good and now you're healthy and enlightened and all this stuff, but it's like, how'd you do it? Because you didn't, like, I don't think you did, like, you didn't go to, like, meetings weekly or anything like that, right? Like, you paved your own path with how you got there too.
Yeah. So so it was probably for a good, like, I don't know, maybe 6 months. So it was 2021, November 2nd, 3rd, 2021. For probably, I don't know, let's just call it 6 months before that, right? Maybe not, maybe less. I was making effort to, like, I wanted to be sober. And I was starting to listen to different things. I was starting to, run on a consistent basis, right? So I was starting to do some things right. And my mindset, really my mindset was evolving. But at the same time, I'd fall right back. Like, I couldn't get myself out. Right. And so anyway, I remember exactly the moment when I decided, it had switched over from that thing that we talked about earlier, where there was no awareness, to, at this point, for this 4 to 6 month period, there was awareness now. Right now it was about decisions. I was out, I had just gone out to Seattle. I was living in an Airbnb out in Seattle, and I was first couple weeks out there, I was dry, and then, then I just went on a fucking bender. And what happened was that, I remember distinctly waking up the day, the last day that I had a hangover, and I realized, right, that I was in this thing so deep, and it had me, by the balls so much that if I could overcome this thing, if I could tackle this, that I could do anything, right? And at the same time, I started to visualize a version of myself that I wanted to become, that was probably being created over a period of time, where I started to see myself as the rich role for someone else, right? I started to see myself. I know during this, like, Isla was actually a very impactful for me too. Because she, when she came here, like I was still living at home when she was born, and I spent, I think,
this is
close to
our sister's kid for context.
Our niece, our first niece or nephew, right? And I remember being blown away by, just being blown away by how much I loved her, right? And at the same time, like, I was aware of how I was perceived, right? And so I felt like it probably at that point, people wouldn't have been comfortable with me alone in a room with Isla, right? Taking care of her, right? And, I started to see myself as not just, not just able to, babysit Isla, but like I saw myself as, someday when my brothers and sisters, one of their kids, gets, is dealing with with something serious, like really serious, right? That I'd be the one you'd send him to, because I knew, like, I'd been through some real shit and came out the other side. So there was this clear vision of the person that I wanted to be, and then I made a decision. I don't know how I made the decision, but it was. And I've talked about this recently, like in terms of like really studying and understanding how things work, but it was something that just latched, right? And the thing is, it was such a deep decision that it almost like instantly changed my identity. Looking back, people will say, right, like if you run into a smoker, right, and they're quit smoking, right? And they say to you, "Oh, I'm trying to quit smoking," right? They haven't quit smoking. They're still a smoker trying to quit smoking. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't drink, right? And the reality was, in my mind, it was about 2 or 3 weeks in after I had, gotten through a one difficult social event where at any other time in my life I never would have got through it without a drink, and I didn't do it. After that, I just shot out of a fucking cannon. I felt so good about myself. Mm-hmm. I truly, like, I came home, for Christmas, and on the way home, from Seattle, I flew down to LA. Then I stopped in Austin. In Austin, I rolled through, met all my buddies at my bar down there, went to New York, which was a troublesome place for me always. Mm-hmm. And then I came home and I was probably 45 days sober. And I'm sure that, what everybody else saw, was, oh, that's cool. That's good. I hope it sticks. The truth of the matter is, like, within myself, I was already a lifetime sober. So maintaining my sobriety has not been when I say, so the sobriety piece, I'm talking about obviously the not drinking. That has not been, I think I had one time, probably 6 months in, where there was like this, little tussle that I had. And then outside of that, it's never been a thing. I had no problem being around it. It's just like, that's just not who I am anymore. Right. That's not my identity, is as a sober individual. Where I think all the other stuff came from was that while it started off at the beginning where it was like I identified waking up that morning in Seattle that I never wanted to be hungover again. I was never going to be hungover again. I identified that, okay, this thing is making all of the other things in my life impossible. Until I fix this thing, nothing else will get addressed. So it started with, it doesn't matter. I'll lay in bed for 3 days. It doesn't matter. If I go to sleep at the end of that night and I haven't had a drink, that's a win, right? And that's basically what I did for like a day and a half. But I think the other things that you're talking about, and this is what I hope for everybody, that I don't want to, of course I don't want people to be stuck in addiction, but I don't want to help them just stop drinking, right? Like, I want to help them, discover the strength that is within them to actually face the things, right, that led them to that place, like face their demons, right? And really, engage with life in a pursuit of, a higher version of themselves, right? And so it was, it wasn't just I was stopping drinking. I was, to your point, I was becoming a new person.
Well, I had a ton written down, as you know, that we'd probably go 4 hours if I kept, if I hit them all. But this has been more than we need to at least briefly touch upside before we close it out, because that's obviously. Yeah,
we can, or I do want to.
But if you have something else, let's.
So I'd like to do this, talk about this. I did my first speaking engagement at a recovery center. And as a part of that, I developed what I call my 5 truths of recovery. So I'd love to share that, because you asked me what would you say to somebody else. And I'd rather than talk about upside, I'd rather share what I think could be potentially beneficial. So I have actually added.
And was this at Chris Herron's?
Yeah.
Yeah. So people know that story very well.
Yeah. Sure. And before we do this, maybe I'll say, like, if there was one thing, like if we just get through the 6 truths and then I were to say one thing in terms of like where to get started, if you're still in it, whether you're in deep, whether you're, where I was, where you're trying to get yourself out, if this podcast inspires you, listen to it 100 times. Go listen to Chris Herron's story. Right. Maybe we can add in the show notes, like go listen to Rich Roll's story, listen to the story, listen to comebacks, just infiltrate your mind. I don't even care if you're out there like having a drink, and put it in your headphones. Just infiltrate your mind with stories of people that have been where you're at and have come back to build, a great life. Because that's what you need to start. You need to be able to see a future that you believe is possible for yourself, and you need to have a desire to move toward that. So I think that that goes out to a family member too. Like if you're a parent or a brother or a cousin, like I think that things like podcasts have this unique potential to reach people because it's someone else that's talking that they can relate to, but that is not talking to them. So the defenses that go up when you try to come and talk to them directly, even if you're, a close, non-judgmental friend, are not there when they're just listening to a podcast. So again, maybe we can, put a bunch of example podcasts in the show notes here, but if I was going to start, I would just do that.
Love it. Hit me with the truth.
Yeah. So the first truth of recovery is that your experience of addiction and suffering has the potential to be the greatest gift of your life. And like I said, I know what this thing is. I know how much of a beast it is. I know, there was a period of time where there's very little separating me from a homeless person. Very, very little. So I know that if you can do this thing, there is nothing that you can't do. And, I sit here today, honestly, I talked about, me being the insecure person that I was, right? And obviously, having had the experience of addiction that I've had, I truly know that my potential is unlimited. There's not a single thing on this earth that I believe that I can't do. Can I do it now, everything? No. But there's nothing that I don't believe that I can do. And that was all, the only reason that is possible is because I tackled this thing. The second truth is what you're looking for is so much closer than you think it is. The illusion is that it's far away. So I remember Chris Herron as an example, the same thing I'm recommending to people. I was walking around in the snow in Hingham. I'm sure I had, a couple vodkas in me, and I was listening to Chris's story. And he was talking about how he was when he finally decided to get sober or made the real effort, that he was working as a janitor in a gym or something like that. And I had just gotten so far gone, and I just knew or I at least perceived how other people perceived me. And I just thought I'm going to have to, put together, 2 years or some shit like that and do, work as a janitor, or live this super simple life. And it just felt so far away right before I'd even be taken seriously. Right. But the truth of the matter is, first of all, and you can only experience this, for yourself, is that what you're looking for is not in any outcome. Right. It's whether if there are things that you want, whether it's what we're doing with Upside and they're far away, that's great. Some may be far away or closer than others, but there's nothing in that outcome. Everything that you're looking for is in the process. I know this is common speak, but whether it's self-worth, right? Feeling good about yourself, that comes from doing the work. It doesn't come in getting anywhere. So like I said, once I just started, I had this perception that I needed to go 2 months. Once I got through a dinner in Portland with my buddy Jason Nako, after I had 2 weeks clean, and it was I was going down to meet him and his wife for dinner in Portland, and it was just something that, again, I never would have gone through without, having wine, right, or something like that. And I remember standing in the bathroom, downstairs before I go up to the table, and I'm just you're doing this, right? And psyching myself up. And when I got through that, man, I just felt so fucking good about myself. And that was a matter of 2 weeks and I was on top of the world, right? It is not because what you're actually looking for is not an outcome, right? It is so much closer than you think it is. The third thing is that, or the third truth is that, your problems, we have, like you described, like my problem with work, right? That I thought were my problems. They may be complex, but your solutions are simple. And you have to trust me on this. Like I just described to you the type of problems that I had. And I remember, right? Like, I remember you and Elle coming to me, like toward the end, both of you. And you were trying to get me to do the breathing exercise, and Elle was saying the same thing, just breathe. And I was just like, this is the, like, I don't think I ever flipped out at you, but it was like, this is in my head, it's like, this is the dumbest shit ever. Mm-hmm. Like, clearly you guys don't understand what I'm dealing with here and how big my problems are. Because if you did, you wouldn't be suggesting some dumb shit like just breathe, right? And the reality is that, one, your problems probably aren't as big as you think they are, but you are not going to solve anything. Nothing is ever going to be solved. You are going to start living differently by doing the smallest little things, right? And then the entire universe around you your entire world is going to change around you. And things are going to resolve themselves like little mini miracles. And it will be nothing that you ever solve. Then the fourth thing is doing the work, right, is not as hard as you think it is. It really is not. It becomes, I'm in love with doing the work now, but it is not as hard as you think it is. It's the way that I was living then, the way that, whoever I might be speaking to now is living, that way is so much fucking harder. Like, it's not even close. Mm-hmm. The fifth one is, if you do the work, it's impossible for you not to get the results. You will get the results if you do the work. That's a guarantee. And then the last thing that I just added recently was that you need to slow down in order to speed up. So I think the endurance training analogy is absolutely perfect for this, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I've spent the last probably 8 months, like, with this goal of, I want to run, 5 miles under a 7-minute pace, right? And I just kept, with my same training, just kept trying to run fast and just go longer and longer. And I would hit a wall, every single time. And it's not that I couldn't do it, right? I could do it. It would be a night, like, it would just, be super painful. But it made me not look forward to running, right? It was just like the approach that I was taking was unsustainable, right? And then I picked up Rich Roll's book, which I read for the first time, a couple of months ago. And I realized that he basically, when he started training for his ultra marathons, like, he discovered the same thing, which is that in order to speed up so that you can go really far, really fast, you need to slow way the fuck down, right? And so I reached out to you, and you've given me this less than, maybe it's a month ago, maybe it's a month and a half ago, where I had to now slow down to the point where 2 out of every 3 times that I'm running an 8:20 pace, which feels practically like walking, right? In order to build up my endurance so that I can run 10 miles is now my goal under a 7-minute pace, right? And within whatever it's been, a month and a half, I'm already trained myself to be able to run the 5 miles under 7 that I've been trying to do for 8 months, right? And it's the same exact thing here. People, you know, even the people where they feel like they need help. I know so many people that are like, man, I gotta invest in my mental health. I gotta, you know, but they will not, you know, they are so resistant to stepping away from work, right? Or whatever that is. For me, as you know, I couldn't fathom the idea of taking 3 hours off from my computer and my laptop and my email, right? Let alone 30 days or 60 days. Well, the reality is I ended up effectively taking a year and a half off, right? It's not that I was working on myself that whole year and a half, but once I finally, you know, slowed down and addressed the foundation, if that former version of myself had a year and a half or a 2-year head start on me, I've lapped that dude 100 times over, right, in the last 3 years, right? And so you have to slow down to speed up.
I think that's a good way to end right there. Thank you, dude.
Yeah, thank you, man.